Hello and welcome to What is mBIT and mBraining, a short video introduction to the new field of multiple brain integration techniques. My name is Grace Minton. I'm from the Inspiration Factory. I'm both a mBIT coach and an mBIT trainer. I also train in neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and a ICF accredited coaching qualification. As you can probably guess, I'm extremely passionate about coaching and pretty excited about mBIT as a personal development methodology and coaching methodology. And if you've had an interest in the brain and neuroscience, then you're probably familiar with the fact that at the very foundation of it all, the building block of the brain is the neuron, a specialized cell that connects with other neurons, other cells, through little branches, little tiny tendrils of branches that connect with the other dendrites or branches of other neurons. An average head brain contains approximately 100 billion neurons, and each neuron is capable of creating thousands of connections, some in the tens of thousands. Fascinatingly, when we think or do anything, an electrochemical signal is actually passing down a pathway of neurons, down the neurons and the dendrites as they're connected together. So every functionality is based in neural pathways and electrochemical signals. And this is what it looks like, a real neuron. You can see the little dendrites branching out there in this incredible photo. You might also be aware that in the last 20 years there's been quite a big leap in our understanding of the brain and our neurology. Science used to believe that our brain was a bit more like a machine in that things were, parts of the brain were broken up into different functions, and if that part got damaged, there's nothing you could do about it. We now know that the neural pathways in our brain are capable of rewiring. So new neurons are born all the time, and new connections can be made throughout our entire life. This new understanding of the flexibility of our brain is called neuroplasticity, and it's been a very exciting development. There's been quite a lot of documentaries and a few best-selling books about it. But the neuron isn't just a brain cell, it isn't just the foundation of how we think in our head. Neurons and neural connections take place throughout our entire body. The focus in the talk about neuroplasticity and neuroscience has been very much from the neck upwards. So a lot of what you've been seeing on the documentaries has been about the head brain and new breakthroughs that are a result of new technology showing us the brain in action, live, working. So massive new understandings of how complex and how amazing it is have come out. But neurons don't just exist from the neck up, and our nervous system is more than just our head brain. The next big leap in our understanding of how we function and what we're capable of from neuroscience has occurred in the last decade. As researchers have uncovered that we have complex and functional neural networks not only in our head but also in our heart and our gut. These neural networks are so complex that they meet their neuroscience definitions of a brain. They display functional intelligence, and there's growing evidence that these brains are involved in control and processing of some functions, such as core behavioural competencies. So the neurology around our heart isn't just managing the beating of our heart, and the neurology around our gut isn't just managing our digestion. It's impacting a lot more. And to give you an idea, the official neuroscience name of the head brain is cephalic brain. It can have between 50 and 100 billion neurons. The cardiac brain can have between 30 and 120,000 neurons. And the gut or enteric brain can have between 200 and 500 million neurons. And you can see from this that the head brain is clearly the most complex and having a major impact on running the nervous system. But to put it into context, the gut brain, 200 to 500 million neurons, is also the same size as a cat or dog's brain. And when you look at what a cat or dog is capable of, and think that we also have a neural network in our body that has that much capability for complexity, you start to understand how this new field would be fascinating for coaches and personal development and thinking about how we function. The cardiac brain has a lot less, in the thousands, not the millions or the billions. But we learn in mBIT that this number of neurons has a very big impact in the entire system. So not to be measured just by the number of neurons in terms of impact and influence in our thinking and functioning. And something that mBIT has also done is then take a study across cultures and other theories and philosophies that are outside of science and talk about centers of intelligence in the body. So the concept of the mind body, of the mind not just being in the head brain, has been around outside of the Western civilization and culture for a very long time. And many people in the West have been fascinated by the holistic idea that our mind is not just in our head, but expressed throughout our whole body and potentially processing throughout our whole body. mBIT is particularly exciting if you're interested in that. But how does it help as a coaching methodology? How can you apply the new science and the new understanding that we process things not just from the neck upwards, but potentially in these other centres as well? Well, if we look at the work of coaches and why coaching as a profession and an industry is growing from strength to strength, there is a significant amount of stress and burnout amongst working people today, and it seems a common struggle that many people trying to work out about how to balance their need economically to make a living with also living an authentic life based on their own values and expression of their own, if you like, passions. Amongst humanity, quite generally, there is some need to improve on the effectiveness and wisdom of decision making. On an individual scale, thinking more about coaching clients, many coaching clients come into coaching to problem solve something, to process something, to make a decision that they haven't been able to make alone, just going around and around in their own head. So helping clients access wisdom and come to their best thinking is a pretty core task of coaching. Happiness and well-being is the coaching agenda, helping people reach their potential and just, live their definition of a good life or their definition of good work. And last but not least, there's a real search for identity, purpose and meaningfulness in our society at the moment. In the past, there were more communities and people were perhaps members of more communities, such as religious communities, where there was a lot of direction around this. However, today, the individual has so many options and so much scope and a real need to define this for themselves. And this sounds great, but in effect, a lot of people find this quite hard. A lot of people experience confusion, being unclear about their own direction, paralysed in indecision. not sure about their own criterias. And it's, something that stops them from being effective and resourceful. In the field of personal development, the response to this is it doesn't really matter what happens, it's how you respond that counts. However, how are you to really respond? It's not that easy, is it? Otherwise, there wouldn't be the human condition. Do we follow our head? Do we follow our heart? Sometimes we feel torn in multiple directions. And these sayings, follow your head or your heart, are a few of many sayings in our language that indicate something. In the field of cognitive linguistics, they say that these are kind of a metaphor that reveal something about the unconscious internal process that's going on. When someone says follow your gut, what's your gut response? They're not talking about anything to do with digestion. They're talking about feelings and a sense of something, talking about intuition. When they say don't lose your head, they're not literally talking about being decapitated. They're talking about something about not getting too emotional. So follow your heart. I think we all know what that means. There are many, many sayings like this, and mBIT has also done a study of these sayings and looked for patterns in them. In our life, when people say, follow your heart, I don't know about you, it's not always that easy, is it? So in mBIT, we also recognise that there is no one that's correct. In fact, mBIT is all about integration, integrating and accessing the wisdom and the resources of all the neural networks. And now to a definition of terms. mBIT, multiple brain integration techniques, is literally a set of practical techniques for communicating with, aligning and harnessing the intelligence of your multiple brains, of all your resources in your mind-body. The mBraining concept is just a way of talking about how you are currently doing that, how you're using your multiple brains as the process, your internal process involving these neural networks. So it's just a way of talking about it as a process. How are you mBraining at the moment? What's happening with the multiple brains as a process? And now, just coming back to language for a moment, because this is something that you can start to notice out there for yourself as words emerge unconsciously in your own language and speech, or you might start to listen for it. Let's have a look at some of the patterns that do occur in the language that indicate something about internal process or the mBraining that's going on in people's thinking. These are some common sayings about the head. Where's your head at? They weren't using their head. Not where my head is at. Wrapping your head around this. These kind of refer to being able to understand something or focus on something in your thinking. Deadhead, knucklehead, kind of talk about someone potentially not being very cognitively smart. It's a bit insulting. Losing your head, or your head being below water, if you like, are about being overwhelmed, no longer thinking rationally. These are just some of my interpretations of this from my experience. Now look at this common sayings around the heart. Having a heart, wearing your heart on a sleeve, speaking from the heart with your hand on your heart, something being close to your heart or heartfelt. All of these things are quite different nature, aren't they? They're not about thinking. They're more about deep and important feelings, vulnerability, values, the things that are very important to you. Your heart's desire is lots about your passion. If you have a cold or warm heart, if you have a broken heart, or your heart is stolen, you're really talking about the world of love and connection with people. If your heart is set on it, then you are connected and passionate about it at a deep level. So it's quite a different thing, a few themes, but all along the same themes and different to the head. Let's look at the gut sayings. If you trust or go with your gut, you're kind of talking about your intuition, as in following a message. If you have guts to do something, or you're gutsy, or you don't have guts, it's kind of talking about courage, isn't it? To act. This is fascinating to me. If you can't stomach it, if you find it hard to swallow, if you need time to digest, this is kind of referring to processing something, whether you process it or you don't. The analogy or metaphor of digestion, but relating to concepts or decisions or something else abstract. If you have butterflies in your stomach is doing a flip-flop or tied up into knots, that's a reference to an actual sensation you can get in your gut region that has nothing to do with digestion and lots to do with emotion. So we feel our emotions, strong ones, particularly fight, flight, in our gut brain. When you ask someone to point to where the emotion is in their body, where they have a strong feeling, they do not point to their head, ever. So this brings us to one of my favourite theories in mBIT, which is that these different neural networks have a function to play, something that they are the best neural network to take the lead on. Whilst they still need to be balanced by the wisdom of the other neural networks, if you can get the right neural network to take the lead, it can make a difference. For the head brain, cognitive perception, thinking and making meaning. And in coaching terms, we sometimes talk in NLP coaching about the story the client has, and not spending too much time in the story, because it's an explanation for why something's happening from the conscious mind that they can get quite caught up in and spend a lot of time going around in circles in. But in mBIT terms, we would say that the story has come from the head brain. The head brain's very involved in that. But it's also really involved in rational thinking and cognitive perception, which we really need. And making meaning isn't bad. It's just something to notice in coaching when it comes to creating change. Is it a story about something? The heart brain is in charge of emotions, that is, values, what's most important to us, our true values, and relational effect, or the connection between people and our feelings around that, both positive and negative, as in love and also grief in the heart. And last but not least, the gut brain is quite fascinating, looking at identity, who we are and who we are not, which comes down to our boundaries. Self-preservation, protecting us, the fight-flight response, which is why it's also in charge of action, moving, getting on with something, courage, acting despite something being scary. So the gut brain, just by the way, is the oldest in evolutionary terms of all three neural networks. So some of the core things such as self-preservation and boundaries are in the gut brain. Just absolutely amazing for coaching. Let's talk a little bit about mBIT as it fits into the field of coaching with some very high-level definitions of different types of coaching. So not coaching methods, but just, if you like, very high chunk about coaching. So if you look at performance coaching, this is the kind of coaching where you might have a small business owner or a executive have a coach that can come in and perhaps do some assessments around where you are now, discovery around that, and have some understanding about what would constitute high performance in this area, what you ought to be able to do in your business or in your leadership as an executive, and be able to talk about how to close the gap. So performance coaching is normally done by people with credibility from experience, from having been an executive or a small business owner themselves. And it can be pretty similar to mentoring. Process coaching is more pure coaching. It's what the ICF, International Coach Federation, competencies describe. One person being able to facilitate another person to reach their best thinking and achieve what they have potential for. A process coach can facilitate someone to define their own current state, desired state, and discover how to change thinking. So the process coaching is a process of facilitating someone else to find their own answers and definitions and is concerned with being clean and not leading. And that's the pure coaching, if you like. A process coach could coach someone on all kinds of things and not need to have a background or experience in that. Last but not least, the inner game coaching is a phrase that came from Timothy Galway. He wrote a book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and he talked about how top athletes at that time, there's a large field of top athletes who could be at their peak physical performance and have technical technique down pat. And for them to then become champions in this field, they would need to master the inner game. So let's see what he said. In every human endeavour, there are two arenas of engagement, the outer and the inner. The outer game is played on an external arena to overcome external obstacles to reach an external goal. The inner game takes place within the mind of the player and is played against such obstacles as fear, self-doubt, lapses in focus, and limiting concepts or assumptions. The inner game is played to overcome the self-imposed obstacles that prevent an individual or team from accessing their full potential. Overcoming the self-imposed obstacles that prevent you from accessing your full potential. So inner game coaching looks at things like, how are we processing that? What's our internal process? How do we talk to ourselves with our internal dialogue? What beliefs come into play? What values are driving this? What needs or concerns create the fear that is the barrier? So inner game coaching is very interested in the internal process. And mBIT, how we are using our neural networks in our body, these three centres of resource and wisdom, is essentially an inner game coaching. In mBIT coaching, you learn how to calibrate how the brains are involved, what they're doing, how they're involved in the stuck thinking or state, the barrier to your answer or the outcome that you want. You learn how to work with a process for integration and alignment. And as part of this process, you deliberately seek to access generative wisdom. So in my experience now of training mBIT and using mBIT in my coaching, it is a process which is often experienced as profound, even on topics that start out as superficial, or for example, when you're training, you try and just go with some pretty low-level topics for the sake of learning. It is quite unpredictable when it can go deep and straight to core issues and be quite beautiful and profound. So that is one of the things that's beautiful about mBIT, is a gentle method and a profound method in coaching. If you're interested in learning mBIT coaching to use it in your own coaching practice, the course is a 4-day program. I have a maximum of 10 people in my course, and the full price is $2,195, but the early bird is $1,754. You need to register 30 days prior to the program to receive the early bird price, and that includes GST. If you are interested in mBIT for yourself and not to use as a coach, you may be interested in the Love Your Life coaching journey. This is an online coaching journey with a small group. It incorporates mBIT, NLP and positive psychology, and is based on the new book by Grant Susula, Loving Your Life. We're very excited about this. And that's it for the introduction to mBIT. Below this video there is some contact details for me at the Inspiration Factory. Please feel free to send through any comments or questions. I'm very happy to talk to people about mBIT and answer your questions offline. And thank you for watching this video.